actual honeysuckle bits. So clearly they had a lot of it, a lot of big honeysuckle that they cut down at some point. And you can see throughout there's kind of little piles of it. So looking around here, why might they have done that? What was important to them about removing that honeysuckle? You can speak if you'd like as a representative of, yeah, some young trees coming up. What else?
What, leaving it in the pile, you say? Leaving it in the pile?
No, I'm saying why? Why would they have wanted to manage the honeysuckle? Why did they cut the honeysuckle out?
Well, because what it does to the soil, in addition to crowding out mechanically other species.
So it might have some chemical allelopathic effects.
Keeps other native plants from sprouting, seeds from germinating.
So some invasive plants, they use a whole arsenal of different kind of, all plants do, of different techniques to thrive. And that's not just invasive, but sometimes, you know, they can grow really rapidly, they can disperse and reproduce prolifically. Sometimes they can actually change the area that they're in, their habitat, to their advantage. So some of them emit chemicals into the soil that will hopefully give them a competitive advantage over other plants, called allelopathy, allelopathic chemicals. So those are all potential things that these plants could be doing, but any plant could do that. But many invasive plants have been shown to kind of release allelopathic chemicals that make other plants not do as well. So basically, what I'm hearing from you and what I think of as this is that the reason to remove a lot of these invasives in here is because what you want to have here is a thriving native plant community. You want to have your native wildflowers. You want to have seedlings that are germinating, or seeds that are germinating, seedlings that are growing, trees that are, we see a lot of big gaps in the canopy. So we want trees that can grow into those gaps to make more of a denser forest in the future. And if you have a really dense layer of invasives in the understory, you don't get those things happening. And they will cover up your invasives. And maybe when you remove them, you'll find all these natives that you never knew you had before. But that won't happen if it's just a solid monoculture of winter creeper or of bush honeysuckle or something else. So, yeah, Hannah.
Like, I'm seeing an awful lot of black snakeroot. Will other species come in? Is that something you really don't have to worry about?
Oh no, definitely. I mean, other species, native and invasive. So if you remove one invasive species, another one may take its place. So I know if you've been to the Arboretum at University of Kentucky, they removed the bush honeysuckle and then discovered that in the understory there was tons of winter creeper. And now they have a huge winter creeper issue. So just because you've gotten rid of one does not mean, you know, you're in the clear.
Black snakeroot is a native. So even though it's really thick, it's not. Other natives have the ability to come up through it. Or
there's a seed bank,
yeah,
and the sun allows what's in the seed bank to come up.
And I'm not familiar with black snakeroot and you know, its ability to exclude other species or grow in monoculture. I mean, natives can grow very densely and aggressively and, you know, do that too. But I'm not familiar with this species being invasive. Anyone else?
Well, I was wondering if you're equating exotic with invasive.
So we'll talk definitions in a little bit. So when it comes to invasive species, there's kind of two sets of definitions, in my opinion. There's the definitions that the federal government will use as far as what is an invasive, and then there are definitions that biologists might use as far as what is invasive. So the generally accepted definition of an invasive is a non-native organism that has the potential or is currently causing harm, environmental or ecological, to humans and the things that they need. However, from a biological perspective, the ability of those species to spread rapidly is a key part of that, because if they did not do those things, we wouldn't really care much about them. And that gets into some hair splitting, because some people will say, that plants that are from this continent cannot be invasive because they're native organisms. But we're getting a lot of range shifts right now with changing climate patterns. So you might get a native species that is still having negative impacts as we would define them. But of course, all of that's really subjective.
Right.
So there's some fuzzy territory. So we're going to talk about the definitions, but keep in mind, it is subjective. What we think is damaging, that has the potential to damage our economy or ecology. That is something that we define. So we're not always going to be right about it, and the things that we care about most, there might be pros and cons to something. So honeybees, do we consider honeybees to be invasive? No. They are non-native. Do they negatively affect native bee populations? Yes. Do we care?
That depends on what your perspective is, right?
It depends on your perspective. Earthworms. In some areas, earthworms are invasive. They also have positive aspects. They have negative aspects in those areas.
You mean exotic or invasive?
I mean, they are invasive.
Most earthworms are exotic.
It depends on where in the continent you live.
Glacial
Yeah.
affected areas.
In glacial affected areas. But do they count as invasive if they have naturally moved up slowly over time from the areas that haven't been covered by a glacier?
Mile a year.
Yeah, exactly. Does that count as invasive versus an earthworm that's been introduced for agricultural purposes that is kind of running amok in a forest, So these are all things that I have no answers for, and we could debate and discuss. And in fact, people who study invasive species do talk about those kinds of things. So yeah, these are all really valid points. But the federal definition of an invasive species is a non-native organism that has the potential to cause economic or ecological damage that would hurt people, or that we care about. How about that?
Not necessarily animals or other.
Said maybe people, or that we care about that damage. Yeah.
So would bush honeysuckle, would that be considered?
Yes.
Well,
Bush
federal
honeysuckle is
definition.
definitely considered an invasive. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, sound good? Let's keep walking.